The following is a presentation on how to write a first-class dissertation. My name is Andreas Samutis. I am a fourth-year medical student at UCL. Last year I just finished my intercalated Bachelor of Science in Surgical Sciences, which is arguably one of the most competitive intercalated bachelors in UCL. I was very fortunate enough to have met and worked with some exceptional people, some very smart people, and they helped me to achieve basically I got the top marks for my dissertation. It was nominated for quite a few stuff, for some awards, and I also got the best undergraduate presentation prize from my faculty. So I basically learned a few stuff, and I wanted to share them with you guys, see what you guys think. So this presentation is going to be, and we're going to cover the hypothesis, aims, how to build those, how to write your dissertation, graphs and statistics, viva, presenting and publishing, and then some examples of my presentations, which you can hopefully learn something from. Through this whole presentation, we're going to show you some tools, websites, links, add-ons, stuff like that, which you can use in order to write your dissertation, hopefully write a first-class dissertation. So let's begin. Moving on to the next section, writing. Okay, change a bit of color. So we've talked about forming our hypothesis and aim. They should be novel and applicable. And then the other thing we need to do, which is super, super important, is find previous high-scoring theses. So how do you do this? You go to people from the year above and you ask them who did well in last year's thesis. You ask them to give you their thesis, and then you ask them also, this is very important, to give you the thesis that they based their thesis on. So they probably have theses from other years above them, which are like, which were the high-scoring ones. And then you gather 2-3 theses. You don't need more than that. And then you read those theses, and then you see what they did similarly, so you see their success points. And then you copy the structure from these. This is important. And then you go back to your current literature, and you start reading your current literature again. Through this whole time, you're doing systematic reviews, etc. And these shape your hypothesis, so it's like a circle, and you're making notes at the same time. We're going to talk about making notes in a bit at the end, how to save all these papers and make notes on them. So this is a part one of getting an idea of what's going on and understanding how to structure your thesis or your dissertation. Part two is actually writing it. You need to start writing as early as possible. I'd even suggest in first, second week that you start your project, start writing. You can start writing from your intro. We'll discuss exactly what you're going to start writing, but you can start writing from your intro even if you don't have your methods and your results. So you start with your intro. We'll talk about these in more detail in a bit. So you start with your intro, then you do your figures with your methods and your results. You should do nice figures, nice illustrations. We're going to talk about those as well, which should guide, these figures should guide your methods and results. So you're going to be writing around them. And then your methods and results are going to guide you to write your discussion. And then your discussion is going to, from your discussion, you're going to get the key points, write your conclusion. And then at the end, very important point, at the end, you do your abstract and your title. Swiftly moving on. These are just some slides that from my actual dissertation, so you can basically get an idea. This is the first slide. You got your title, your name, etc., your department. Second page of your dissertation, statement. This is my work. Unless I explicitly say someone else's work, all this work that you see in this dissertation is my work. Acknowledgements. You acknowledge anybody else that helped you. I acknowledged all these students and friends that I told you that I made. I acknowledged them here. I was like, they helped me do this and this, and you pay respect to them as well, and anybody that gave you equipment to use, etc. Your abstract. When do we write this? At the end. That we are at the end. And then you also got your table of contents, important one as well. Moving on, abbreviations, a few points here. One point is any abbreviations that you're using in the text go here, but also whenever you mention them for the first time in the text, you don't abbreviate, you write them in full text. So whenever I want to write an abbreviation, I write it in full text, abbreviation, and then I use the abbreviation, even though I have this sheet. Hopefully that makes sense. List of figures and tables, and then we start with our introduction, lovely figure there at the beginning. And then we're going to talk about this in a bit as well. Usually people have a great introduction, methods, good enough, and then everything goes downhill from there. And this is actually what differentiates a first-class thesis, your discussion. So we're going to talk about that and how to improve that. So let's start with that intro. First things first, we talk about this thing, so-called thing, the funnel-shaped thesis. So the funnel-shaped thesis, the funnel-shaped intro, sorry, is you start big. So you start big and then you funnel down. So let's take for example my thesis. I was talking about corneal blindness. So we start with corneal blindness and all these different types, how to solve it. So we start with the eye. So you can start with saying, okay, corneal blindness contains these diseases which cause this thing, which cause corneal blindness, and they cause it, and then I show the anatomy of the eye, and then from the anatomy of the eye I go down, and this is how we solve it, and this is the current solution to it, and this is where the next point comes up. So we've got the problem, so corneal disease, the current solution to it, and then we talk about the current solution, what the current solution has, so the problems with the current solution, and then I provide my solution, how that differs to that one. So, for example, here, you can say, think of it like this. This is how I did it. So 12.7 million people in the world have corneal blindness. Only 1.4% of them actually get cured. This is the current methods, the current way that we solve it. This is the problems with the current way that we solve it. And this is what I hypothesize is going to be better. And this is what I'm going to research. Last point, dumb it down as much as you can. So your thesis has to be written in such a way that when someone from a totally different field, let's say not an ophthalmologist, someone from cardiology, someone from cancer biology, could read your dissertation, and your intro should have the information in it in order for that person to be able to understand everything that you're saying. So in the intro, you have to discuss about all these simple stuff, such as eye anatomy, such as disease, and you have to break it down and make it as simple as possible, as if you're teaching it to someone, so they can later understand the implications of what you're showing in your results. Moving on, methods. It's kind of a boring part. You basically say exactly what you did. This is where that book that we said in the beginning comes. So in the hypothesis and aims part, we talked about having a book with you and writing everything that you're doing down. Whatever you've written down, it comes here. You're straight to the point. I did this, I put this amount of alginate in, and I put this amount of which came from this company, I bought it from, etc. You don't hear, this is a very important point, you don't say why you're doing it. You're just saying that you did it. And then you also got your statistics, where you say, for 2 groups or more, I did this statistics, and for less than 2 groups, I use this statistical test to prove the significance, etc. And this is materials and methods. I think that's about it for methods. Again, you use your figures here as well. And make illustrations. You see these illustrations here, they help people understand. I can't express it, how nice it is to read a thesis and for it to have some nice diagrams in it. Results. Use figures and graphs. I just talked about that. So what do you do here? You've got your results, you've got your nice figures that you've created in your graphs, and you basically get those results and you talk about them. And you talk about them in this way. So for example, I have this graph. I'm not going to sit here and talk about every single different aspect of this graph. I'm going to get the 2 to 3 important aspects from this graph that I want the reader to pay attention to, because I'm going to come back to them in my discussion and they have some significance. So from this graph, for example, I'd say V2, which is the orange lines, have a greater shear modulus than version 1, V1, which are the blue lines. That's the one takeaway. And the second takeaway is I want you to look at the red arrow and see that the yield point for V2 is higher than the yield point for V1. Done. 2 points. You don't have to talk about the whole graph and whatever and all the different things and all your different findings. Include, very important point, include your positive and negative results. Don't be biased. We can easily fall into the trap of finding our significant results and only including those in our thesis. You also include your negative results, and you can derive lots of stuff from them. We'll discuss in a bit as well. So, discussion. This is probably the hardest part, and this is what, like we said, differentiates the first class thesis. Negative results. So this is where we talk about it. So a lot of people will not get positive results, or you won't get something significant. You get something which is insignificant, but that doesn't mean that your research has gone down the bin. No, it's exactly the opposite. You've proven that this method or this gene in this cancer does nothing. What does that actually mean? That means that you've actually saved time for other researchers who are actually looking, doing this in the same field as you, to not go back and check that gene, for example. You've done some work, and you're able now to come and be like, okay, since I've seen that this stuff doesn't work, I'm going to focus on this stuff. So you can derive meaningful and applicable, actionable outcomes from even negative results. Very important. We talked about that. Okay, potential structure. You start with your summary, important points that I found in my results. Bum, 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 bum. Your current literature. Okay, the important points, how these are related to the current literature. So I found that this method is better than this method, but in the literature, they found something different. But in the literature, they found the same thing. And why is that? What's the implication of that? Well, if I found something different, then that kind of means that, you know, there's some discrepancy in the literature and more research needs to be done. Or if it's the same, that actually strengthens my hypothesis to be true. And then you've got your short and long-term outcomes. Long-term, well, this method might be better for curing corneal blindness, therefore, you know, we should continue, etc. And maybe we'll come to a point where everybody with corneal blindness can be treated very efficiently and effectively. And in the short term, you basically talk about all the research, how the research that you've done can aid to the research that's going to be done in the short term. The next steps. Limitations. This is a very important point. So you have to identify your limitations before other people identify them. It's as simple as it gets. When you do your Viva in those 10 minutes or 15 minutes that you're going to be doing your presentation of your thesis, people are going to grill you, and you're going to have to find the stuff that they're going to grill you upon before they find it. And this is where you find it and you put it in your paper and you say, so this is what my paper lacks. This is what I'm doing wrong. Because if you do that and you address it there, then it's much easier for you to come back at it when you're presenting, you're discussing about it. Instead, oh, I didn't know about that, I'm sorry, etc. Future directions, very important. For example, I did a diagram. Wherever I could do diagrams, I did diagrams, because diagrams can actually save you on your word count as well. So the diagram here for the next year, this is what I'm going to be doing. Like, it shows you're organized, you're passionate about what you're doing, you know, you're on it. And then your conclusions. Your conclusions, 2 to 3 conclusions, directly to the point. I usually, whenever I write a conclusion, I'm like, so this is the problem, this is how many people are affected, this is how it affects these people on an everyday basis. And then you're like, this is the current problem, this is what I found, this might be a good solution. Boom, you're done. Conclusion. So these are just some general points for writing your thesis. This is called, after I finished with my dissertation, I basically reflected back and I was like, okay, what was I doing all that time? And I came up with this acronym called warfare. I was basically writing a part, so I'd written the introduction, I'd review it myself, and then I'd send it for feedback. I'd get the feedback, and then repeat the same process. I'd write the methods. I'd write intro and methods. I'd change whatever they told me to change. I'll send that again. They'll review it. They send me feedback, and I repeat. And this thing was, so it was on repeat, this whole thing. Write, review, feedback, repeat. And the more times this happens, the better it is. The fact that it's important, okay, there's one detail before we move to the next slide. When you send your thesis for feedback, I think you can try this and see how it goes. Don't look at your, leave them to give you the feedback for about a week, and then come back to it once the feedback is back. Come back to it and see it, because then you see it with a fresh pair of eyes, and you're able to identify stuff that you didn't identify before. So in order to do this, though, you have to start early and leave time to be able to come back to it. Okay, so whenever you're writing, these are just some few things that I found very helpful. These are the tools. So I wrote my thesis on Word. On Word, there is this thing in view mode. You go to focus mode, and then it basically removes the band, the strip from the top, and it only shows your thesis. And this comes to this is basically limiting distractions. This is a manifestation of this point, but on your PC. And you should also think about this in a greater context whenever you're going to sit down on your desk to sit and write for a good chunk. Like you're going to sit for 2-3 hours to write a good chunk of your thesis. Remove everything from your table. This is my humble advice. Just have your laptop on your table, nothing else. Maybe a cup of tea, and that's it. And remove the distractions. Chuck your phone away, put it on silent, and then do the same thing on Word. So you can be focused on that, and you can go into that deep focus, because what you're trying to do is, especially if you have a hypothesis which is novel and you're writing stuff which is new, you have to be able to think. You have to be able to really focus and get really invested in what you're writing. You can also use Grammarly. I use it. It's pretty helpful. There's a free version and paid version. Okay, this is an important slide. So hopefully you've come across citation managers. Citation managers like Mendeley and EndNote. EndNote is a paid version. If you're in UCL, you get it for free. I'll give the link in the description. And Mendeley is the free version, which most people have. So what these do is there's also add-ons on Google Chrome. So you do an add-on on Google Chrome, for example. And what this does is you're searching for a paper. You find a very nice paper, and you're like, oh, I want to use this in my thesis. Lovely. So on Google Chrome, you're able to add this paper to your library. And whenever you add this paper to your library, you can have different sections. So what I do is add this paper to my library into this part of my library, which would be for intro. So I'd find a nice paper. So I'm doing all my research and I'm reading all these lovely papers, and I'm adding the papers to the sections that I want to. So I want this paper to talk about this paper in the intro. I want to talk about this paper in the discussion. And what happens is, on your Mendeley account, you'll be able to have a list of all the papers that you found and that you want to discuss in your thesis. And this is lovely, because then you can also take notes on them. And then when you're writing your thesis, there's an add-on on Word as well. When you're writing your thesis, this is so important. You can cite the papers that you have in your library. So you just add a citation, and then it goes and it comes up with that citation. So why is this important? This is important because you've automated the process, because maybe you want to change your reference style. Maybe you want to go from Harvard to Vancouver. If you do this manually, if you're importing reference manually, then it's going to take ages for you to do. And the other thing is, when you're doing your proofreading, you might want to switch things up. You might switch this paragraph up there. You might want to remove this sentence, etc. These things all happen automatically through Mendeley. It'll alter the citations for you as you're altering the text. Whereas if you don't do this, then you have to do this manually. I think this is an SOS thing. Like, you have to have this. The investment that you're going to make, the 1 hour to learn how to work this program, and the return you're going to get out of it, it's immeasurable. Okay, let's talk about extension for a bit. So how do you get an extension? And why should you get an extension? So what happened with me is I started doing my project. Few things happened. It was during COVID, so some reagents that I wanted to use didn't come in the time that I needed to come. Some people were using the equipment that I wanted to use, and I had some delays. And then because I had a plan, so because I had a long-term plan, I was able to see, okay, I'm not going to make it in time. And because I was able to see that, because I had the plan and because I knew exactly what happened, I filed as early as possible for an extension. And I was like, I want an extension because I want an extension to my thesis, to my dissertation, because this happened. So this reagent, 7 days delay to come. I had the evidence to back it up. This person was using this piece of equipment. I went to the person, I told them, would you be willing to back me up if they need evidence? Yes, of course. So I had the evidence to back that up as well. And then I asked for the extension as early as possible. I think it was in the first month that I asked for it. So the whole thing was like 4 months until you completed it. And I got it. And most people who do it early get it and have a good reason why they get it. Now, here comes the problem. When people leave the extensions at the end, and then they're like 1 week before the dissertation to give in the dissertation, and they're like, oh my God, I need more time. I can't believe I got into this. I need an extension, and they file for an extension. But usually, because we are people and we tend to do this, with you just filed an extension. Another 10, 15 people have done the same thing. And then what happens with the faculty is that they get all these extensions coming in at 1 week before the deadline, and they can't give extensions to all of them because they need to have a minimum amount of papers being submitted on that day. So the examiners can mark them until the viva or the presentation that you're going to do, or until the release of the exam grades. So they're not going to give an extension to everyone. And this is what happened to a lot of my classmates last year when they filed for an extension just before just before the deadline, and they didn't get it. So extension, file early, and have a good reason for it. Be able to back that reason up. So we could not be talking about writing and not talk about ChatGPT. So if you don't know what it is, go find out what it is. It's going to make your life so much easier in so many ways. It's an AI. It's an AI chatbot where you tell it to, write me an essay on this, on that, etc., and it will write some stuff. So how do you use this? It's an amazing tool, but you need to use it the right way. Turnitin, which is the plagiarism finding thing that UCL uses, back in January this year, they said that they can recognize, this is a video on YouTube, I'll link it in the description, they can recognize stuff that's written by AI chatbots such as GPT. So how not to use ChatGPT is to be like, write me an introduction on corneal disease, and it'll write you, and then you copy paste that in your thesis. Don't do that. Like, even in the sense that it's not going to help you become better at writing as well. So even in that kind of, even if you could get away with it, I don't do it. I think the best way to use it, this is how I used it, was write down, okay, tell me the 3 different points or the 4 different points that I have to address in my intro for corneal disease. And it'll be like, address this point, this point, this point. And then you send it, and then you'll be like, what are the papers, the most significant papers associated with these points, and it'll send you the papers. So then what you have is, you basically have a skeleton, and it's created the skeleton for you, for your intro, and then you go read those papers, you take your notes, and then you know exactly what you're going to write, and then you write the thing. So I think that's the best way to use it. And just out of curiosity, I wrote it, I asked it for any advice on writing a dissertation. This was after I completed the slides, and he had dice. And this is what it came up with. It said start early, which we said. Choose a topic that you're passionate about. Yes, we said that as well. Give a detailed plan. We talked about the plan. Read other dissertations. We talked about that. Write regularly. Yeah. Get feedback. Talked about that. Our warfare strategy. Edit and proofread. Very important. And then the only thing that we have left it here at the end, celebrate your achievements. So at the end, pop open a champagne bottle and be like, yeah, we made it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed these, please consider subscribing. It makes a big difference. Please comment This is important. Comment and put feedback in the comments. The reason why I've done the series is because I've actually given these lectures to students in UCL and in third year, and I've gotten back feedback which I was very surprised by, which is very good. Yeah, they enjoyed it. They got a lot of it, and I was like, because I got that feedback, that motivated me to do this and put it outside, etc. So if there's something that you want to know, or if you like this, etc., say it, and then you basically motivate us in order to make more content that's going to be helpful, hopefully, for you guys. If it's not helpful, say it. And give us a like. That helps as well. That's about it. And all the institutions, you could see them. Yeah. Thank you.